Next Fortune 500 founder. Today we have Greg Hilton and Jerell Moore. Jerell is the EVP and Chief Diversity Officer at Cadence Bank, and he is responsible for the creation and leadership of Cadence's company-wide diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategy. Prior to Cadence, he was head of global inclusion programs at Google. Atlanta-based Jerrell is responsible for leading Google's internal community partnerships and for helping EE deepen a sense of inclusion and belonging within the company. And sorry, I got a little distracted there. This includes working with the approximately 40,000 Googlers who participate in our employee resource groups, leadership councils, and allyship programs. In addition, Jerrell leads EE's diversity culture efforts and provides key insight around employee sentiment related to DEI. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. How we doing? Good morning. Good morning. Anybody talking out there?
Good morning.
Hello, loves. Well, thanks y'all for coming. My name is Greg Hilton. I'm one of the co-organizers for the Growth Summit. Also a co-founder and managing partner with SoCo. We're a work cooperative and a shared workspace based here in Columbia. And I'm the least corporate human on the planet. And so we thought it would be really, really awesome to pair me up with Jerrell, who, as y'all heard, has worked with some of the biggest brands and biggest names out there. So we're gonna unpack Jerrell's experiences working in some of the largest brands out there in the United States. We're gonna have some conversations about what he's seen and what we might be able to learn from that. And really, this is really for that founder out there that is looking to figure out how to grow to that next level, is dreaming about that Fortune 500 leadership position. And Jerrell really wants to talk a little bit about how to make sure you do that the right way and not the wrong way. So thanks for coming out. Hope you're having a good time so far. Jerrell, we want to thank you for coming. You're a USC alum, which we love. And you have done some stuff, my friend.
Yes, I have. And good morning, everyone. My name is Jerell Moore. I'm actually from Columbia. Went to South Carolina State undergrad, went to law school and business school, went to the Moore School here for graduate school, and am really, really excited to be with you this morning. When Greg and I were talking about, what do I do, right? What could I share at an entrepreneur summit? Well, I ran my own shop for about 4 years. I ran a consulting firm. And we were kind of brainstorming and trying to figure it out. And Greg is the most anti-corporate person I've met in a long time, right? But as I started to share with him a lot of my experiences, he said, Jerrell, I think people really need to hear some of your experiences as they're growing their companies and their firms, especially as they're thinking about, how do you scale? How do you protect, your culture? What are some of those missteps that I've seen bigger companies make? Because I've just been really lucky in my career to have worked for some large global brands. So, that's kind of where I am, and hopefully we can have a good, hearty conversation. And with the size of this group, maybe we can save some time for some Q&A at the end.
How's that sound, y'all? All right, cool. Let's do it. Hey, could you do me a favor? Could you close that door? You're the best, and I love your hair. Okay. You have worked for some incredibly large brands. I mean, not just like, wow, that's interesting, but I mean, Google, Nike, Cadence Bank, funny enough, is the smallest of the corporate entities that you work for. I mean, you have worked for some of the largest brands on the planet. What attracts you to these giant things and this diversity of opportunities and challenges? I mean, I have to imagine every single one of these major entities is a completely different culture every time you roll in there.
It is. It completely is. And, it's kind of like dating. When I was earlier in my career, I went for the visual. I wanted to, coming out of the Moore School, I wanted to work for a household brand name, right? And that didn't happen. My first job was at the railroad. CSX Transportation. Other than being stopped at a stoplight, most people don't really think about working for the railroad when they're in college unless they're majoring in supply chain or transportation or something like that. But I wanted to work for a large global brand, and that's kind of where my career took me. So from Burger King to Nike to Google. But ironically, Cadence Bank is the smallest number of employees, smallest footprint. We're not even a national firm.
You're done with it. Are you done with corporate? You're done with it. He's done with it, y'all.
I think, honestly, I think I'm working my way back to entrepreneurship, to be honest with you. Yeah,
Another converted him.
I think I am. I think the only difference, and we can talk about this in another fireside chat, I think what I'll probably do is buy a company versus, start bootstrapping it is hard. So I tip my hat to everyone that bootstraps it.
Okay, so we penned this, your love letter to the next Fortune 500 founder, CEO. And I don't know if y'all saw my LinkedIn post when I was talking about Jerrell and kind of like how I was excited about this. We do not have a Fortune 500 company headquartered in South Carolina, you guys. Not in the entire state. We have had a couple in the past, but they have been acquired and made their way to other states. So why a love letter? So what do you want to tell these people that are aspiring?
A couple of things. So I think a couple of things, that I picked up, and there's no chronological or order of importance, but one of the most important things that jumps out to me, and Greg and I are going to just hit a couple of topics, is culture is everything. When I left Columbia and moved to Florida to work for the railroad, the railroad is this big, sleepy institution that you don't think anything about, but it's had probably one of the deepest and realest cultures I've ever worked in my life. A lot of companies hire great marketing firms and communications firms to write their core values and principles, but most employees, if they can recite them, they really don't live by them. But it's still to this day, other than Nike, the only company I've ever worked for where every core value and principle, not only did employees know, but they lived by in everything that we did. So one of the things was, safety. Safety is a way of life. Clearly, with us being here in South Carolina, we know CSX had a derailment a couple of years ago. That's a really big deal, right? But, trains can derail every day. And so for us, even down to the way that we parked at work, when you go into the corporate headquarters parking lot, every car is backed into a parking space because it's safer to back in. So our leaders thought about everything safety driven from the time you pulled into the parking lot to the way we started meetings. So if we were at CSX right now, we wouldn't have just started this fireside chat. We actually would have had a safety briefing. I would have asked us, is someone in here CPR certified? Who's going to call 911 if something happens? They made sure, and I'm talking about white collar jobs. When you're at corporate headquarters where there's no trains rolling through the office, they made sure that everyone was thinking that. And that was when, with each of our core values, we really thought that way. So when you're thinking about your company and your values, make sure you're writing and putting something in front of your employees, even if it's just 3 or 4 employees, that they're going to live and really believe in. That is something that you're going to really practice day in and day out. And, again, I've worked for some really cool companies with some really glossy value statements and culture statements. But, this company that no one rarely talks about had probably the richest culture that I've worked in. Nike was another one. We had what we called core maxims. And I think because Nike ran like a startup, and when I went to Nike, Nike was a relatively young company, a lot of our, core values, we still ran very lean and lived by. And so when we made decisions, we'd be in a meeting, and if we ever reached an impasse, someone would pull out one of our core values and say, how do we use a core value to make a decision? And I've worked at enough companies to say that's very rare for companies to do that. So like if we were trying to make a budget decision, or if we were trying to make a branding decision or a people decision, we'd say Nike's a brand. and how do we leverage our brand to make this decision?
Yeah, I'm interested. So this, in my journey, which is, at the it's like on the solo or very small team, micro enterprise level, beginning to explore some of these things as well, and running into challenges where, an opportunity, it goes against our core values or what I believe our core values are. And that presents some challenges sometimes. I'm interested in the audience. How many of y'all have core values, either personal or core values for your business? Anybody brave enough to rattle off one or two? Anyone? What was that? Integrity. Chris? Do your best. I like that. Rita? Kindness. That's a fantastic one. Anybody else? Okay. That's a very definitive statement. What do you do out of interest?
Well, my husband makes custom doors, and we have a space that is open. It's like a co-working space for different craftspeople.
Very cool. Cool. Anyway, thank you for sharing and interacting.
Well, and so I got to put Rita on the spot. So when you talk about culture, and I was talking about glossy and flashy stuff. So I'm staying at the Hotel Trundle, and they have tremendous marketing and branding, and the lobby looks amazing, like a lot of companies that put on a good show. But when you start to interact with their staff, you see that kindness is real. When I pulled in and checked in last night, and I'm from Columbia, so I don't know what that building was before it became a hotel, but it wasn't a hotel when I lived here 20 years ago. And, so I'm already kind of awkward. I'm kind of like, what is this? Trying to figure this out. Are these going to be uncomfortable rooms? Am I going to have a good experience? And the staff, from the moment I've gotten there, and I haven't even been there 24 hours, and I've interacted with the staff about 4 or 5 times. Every time, kindness has been their top priority. 2 different staff members even said, you're going to have the best experience here with our hotel, right? So her core value is showing up from a culture standpoint in her staff. And I sat in the lobby. I'm a people watcher. I had 2 free cups of coffee this morning and watched them interact with staff. So that would be what I'm talking about and I don't know what her growth, strategy is, but that would be something that she'd want to protect, because we all know it's easy to do it with one hotel, but let's say she becomes 20 hotels. That's something that you have a challenge scaling. But from a leadership standpoint, that thing that keeps a customer like me coming back, I'm going to remember that. Because now, when I come for a Carolina game, I know where I'm staying. I'm going to be in Orangeburg this weekend, but I'm actually going to drive back to Columbia. So it's her core value, something that she probably just pinned when she was thinking this, that thing translates to customer value.
It's almost like it's an unbreakable law.
It's got to be.
This idea of this is what defines us. And what we will, and a line we won't cross.
And let me tell you, and we got 10 of these to talk about. But the reason that culture is so important, so Google started in, I think she became our CFO in her garage, right? 2 or 3 people that then grew to like 8 people, then 12 people. Well, now Google's 180, 190,000 people, right? And Google is buying companies wholesale. Well, the challenge with that, with scaling and growing so fast, like my last role at Google was in Google Cloud. So we were buying entire cloud businesses. And by it not being law, we had a Microsoft splinter and a Cisco splinter. And me being in HR, when I would talk to, legacy Google people, they would say, well, yeah, they're just Microsoft over there working at Google. So they say, oh, yeah, those are just Cisco employees working at Google. And so when you're thinking about it as a founder, that's a problem, because you're not doing Google work. You're just bringing Cisco to Google to do work. Yeah. And clearly, those are first world problems, right? You're probably sitting here saying, well, Jerrell, that's a problem I'd like to have. But culturally, that is a massive challenge. Yeah. We hired, I know there's an AI panel going on right now. We purchased this amazing security information firm, started by some former military guys. They are awesome. But they're all former officers. They're very rigid, they're very structured, and coming into tech, not that there's clashing or anything, they just do things very differently than tech companies do. So from a culture standpoint, from a law, you got to know what your laws are.
Yeah. There's also the other law. We're going to transition here, and I'm looking at Chris, who just, I don't know if y'all saw his session, but he crushed it out there. I mean, he brought some fire because it was cold. There's the law of the jungle.
Yeah.
And when we were talking, you said something that I was like, man, that's really interesting. You said, respect the competition, even when they can't hurt you. And I'll let you share the story because I was like, why would you say that? First of all, I appreciate the concept of just respecting those around you in general, but respecting competition even when they can't hurt you. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Well, first, I played college football. I played for South Carolina State, and you always respect your opponent, right? It's football season. We're seeing upsets every weekend. So even if you don't like sports, if you don't like sports or don't know sports, teams that aren't supposed to win are winning it day in and day out. That happens all the time. I live in Atlanta. The Braves are the best team in baseball, but yet they're sitting at home and the World Series was just decided last night. From a competition standpoint, I was at Nike when Under Armour launched. And, Under Armour was a small startup. Kevin Plank and I are the same age, the founder and CEO of Under Armour. And, from a Nike standpoint, Nike was starting to move from startup to corporate, as you kind of talk about. And Under Armour had a great concept. They were very sexy. They were very attractive. And what's most important was they could get to market much faster than Nike could. Nike had become bureaucratic. We had added a lot of layers of decision making, but our executives weren't responding to the competition that Under Armour was bringing to market. And so I'm going to tell a story that's going to conflict itself because we got two different examples about strategy. I'm going to talk about strategy in a minute. But so the Nike calls it dry fit, the dry fit material that we have, right? Well, Nike had the T-shirts that Under Armour became known for. Nike had that product 3 years before Under Armour even existed as a company. But Under Armour got it to market faster than Nike, and they could get it to consumers in a way that Nike couldn't. And so because Nike said this is a startup, we're Nike, we're fighting with Adidas and Reebok, we're not going to give you the time, they started to cut into Nike's market share. Also, Nike was known as a running shoe company at the time. Nike was fighting to get into other athletic categories. And so what I learned, and again, I'm just an HR guy, but I would sit in these business meetings. I said, they're not paying attention to their competition. And the competition was lean, mean, and hungry and willing to do things that Nike was not willing to do. And so for me as an athlete, as a former student athlete, I said, yeah, we're not living by one of our core values here. So for you all as business owners, I would say, hey, if there's someone that's starting up or if there's competition out there, always be respectful of them, because there's an edge that you just always need to be aware of, that before you know it, there may be a competitive advantage that's happened overnight, right? That you're at a position of weakness that you don't know about, because now here we are, Under Armour. It's been 15 years since I worked at Nike. And Under Armour has now become the size that Nike was when I was at Nike.
It's almost arrogant, right? To not look around and say, to say, see these folks over here, I really can't learn anything from them. This idea of there's no possible way that they can do it better than we can do it, and so we have nothing to gain from understanding and respecting. Because for me, respect is all about. Healthy competition is about understanding who you're fighting with, or who you're in the jungle with, and not necessarily so that you can destroy them, but so that you can stay lean and stay flexible and stay nimble and stay competitive, right? You can learn stuff from everyone about everything that might have an impact on your business.
Yeah.
What in that same vein, you had also talked about this idea of like goal setting, and you had mentioned in your experience, the goals are meant to be big, audacious, and moonshots, I think, are the words that you've.
Yeah, and that's such a Google term. I had never heard the term moonshot before I worked in tech. And, but I think every company needs to have a North Star, especially as you start to bring employees on. I've worked at companies that have been scattered with their areas of focus and their goals. And when you stop and ask an employee what the goals of the company, because we all do strategic planning sessions and we come up with these great annual plans and 3 and 5 year plans, but most employees can't recite those. But when I was at Nike and our CEO said, hey, we're going to go in the next 5 years, we're going to go from a $5 billion company to a $10 billion company. That was something that every employee could recite. I'm at Cadence Bank. We just finished a campaign 2 years ago where it was a goal to become a $50 billion institution. Every employee in the company understood that. Our Google Cloud business, our goal was to become number 2 in the cloud business. I think, you have to have a moonshot or this, I'm older, so we would call it BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. There has to be something that, even if it's just 2 of you in your company, everyone has to be on the same page. Or if you're a sole practitioner like I was, I mean, when I ran my own consulting firm, it was just me. But my customers and clients, they would need to understand what my goal and intention was from a goal setting standpoint, because what it does is it puts everyone on the same page to help you achieve those goals, right? So if I know that we're trying to get from, I remember my first year in sales was $40,000. So I said, hey, I need to double that in year 2. I just got to get to 80K in year 2. So thank God when I filed my taxes, I was at 82,000. I was like, I hit my goal for the year. And that was a BHAG goal for me to double what I did in year 2 of my sales. And I'm just kind of putting all my business out there. But when you talk about it from a corporate standpoint, and when I was preparing for this, Greg, I went back and checked. I went back and looked at Nike's annual statements. Nike actually did exactly that. They said they wanted to go from a $5 billion to a $10 billion company. They did it in 4 years, not 5. So that was a goal that they put in front of employees, and employees were able to do it. Now Nike's a much bigger company than that, but this was in 2005, 2006.
Can I ask you a question? I hope it's in someone's brain, not just mine. But so there are goals, right? 50% year-over-year growth, and we're going to scale to 3 locations. Blah blah blah. What about vision? What about this idea of sweeping up your team and your customers into something bigger and broader? Where does that fit? You're master of strategy with a lot of this stuff. Where does a vision for your company fit into the goal setting process? And I don't know if y'all. For me, the difference is one is like a future state of being, something that is highly ambitious. Maybe it is measurable. Maybe it's not yet, but it's maybe that North Star you're talking about. Well, how does that settle with you?
Well, I think vision is important for you, and it gets real close to strategy. And I know there's a strategy conversation we're going to have, but vision is important because when you get pulled in different directions, vision keeps you on track. Especially again when you're very early on and people are trying to convince you or sway you in different directions with your business, right? Like I go back to Rita. Bree and I were talking to Rita. There's something that Rita used to do at the Trundle that they don't do anymore. And so we were both like, oh, you got to start doing this again. But I'm sure there's a business reason she doesn't do that anymore. And it may not align with her vision or her strategy, right? So I think that your vision is like, hey, here's my vision for my company. And here's the hard part about vision. And I'll tell you, for me, and this isn't a corporate decision, when I was running my business, there were times that I departed from my business to pay my bills, and it ended up taking me out of better business opportunities because I didn't stick to that vision that I worked really hard on. And I've seen companies do that too.
Yeah, for me, I've seen a lot of folks that don't have a vision, that don't have I'm fired up about this thing where we're going in the future. Like it is big, it is bold, it's something that I'm excited about. I have found that when you don't have that, when you have the bad days, they're a lot worse and a lot harder to get through because you do feel listless, to your point.
You
And
do.
That North Star is probably the best description of it that I've heard. So another thing we talked about, you had said, and this is obviously your bailiwick because you are a people person, but you hear it all over the place, that the horror stories of hiring the wrong people, the on the other side of that, the horror stories of working for horrible humans as your boss. But people is at the center of every strategy that you've been a part of, it sounds like. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah,
and like really, why?
Well, people are your greatest asset, and they are. Unless you have the algorithm to Google search, which is probably a pretty good algorithm to have. People are by far your greatest asset, especially as you're growing your company. If you're a sole practitioner and you're making that first hire, if you're a company that's going from 5 to 10 employees, that next hire is going to mean everything. And what I've seen, time and time again is, companies for a variety of reasons either not invest in their employees or underinvest in their employees. And then we even talked about, Greg, a little bit. Okay. And then we even talked about, hiring the wrong employees. I think, making hiring decisions based on desperation is not a good move. I'm just going to be honest. Greg kind of challenged me. One of my talking points I listed out. I used to be. I am not a gut decision kind of person. The data shows us that when we make hiring decisions based on gut, it usually comes back to bite us. And I know, and Greg said, I don't know, Jerrell. He said a lot of founders say, I'm a go by the gut kind of person. But, when it goes back to vision.
A lot of founders suck at hiring.
Yeah, they do. That's why HR is usually the last thing that startups bring on board, right? And then the HR person shows up and says, what the hell have you all been doing here, right? So people are your biggest asset. For me, overinvest in the development, the rewarding and recognition. And I'm not talking about free coffee and stuff like that. I'm talking about developing people, developing your leaders, not just with titles, but developing people to lead and develop and train others is critical to growing a business. And you want people to want to be there, right? So that takes time. That takes time to find the right people that are going to buy into your culture, who are going to be great ambassadors for your firm or your company.
So we're going to go off script just a little bit. We don't have a script. We have a giant text exchange between Jerrell and I.
Yeah, a data dump.
I was like, "Bah." So I see a lot of friends in the audience, a lot of folks that are really good at what they do. They are figuring out where they're going with their businesses. Some folks have got a really great model, and it's time to lean in. Some folks are figuring out how to make people a core center of kind of like their differentiator. To the business owner or the founder that is looking to hire that next absolutely, oh my God, if I screw this up, it's devastation employee.
Okay.
So we're thinking micro, the next strategic hire. It's a big one. It might be your first or your second or your third. What advice would you give them on how to do that the right way?
I would say, don't start with the employee, start with the job. What's the job that you need done, right? And this is what we often do. It's especially, and again, I'm going to take off my corporate hat and put on when I was running my own business. A lot of the decisions I made, if I was off track from my vision, I made out of loneliness, I made out of despair, I made because someone would have a conversation with me. So I'd say, think about what you need done in the job. And I'm not going to get HR and say write a job description, but yes, write a job description. And make the hire based on what you need specifically done, and hire off of that, right? And be honest with yourself. Be truly honest with yourself, and be okay with it that the person that is the best candidate, you may not like as a person, but they might be the best person for the job. That is by far the hardest thing.
That's very counterintuitive. That makes me scared. I'm scared, Jerrell, now.
They may be amazing because here's the thing: a lot of us hire people we like that we end up having to fire later on, and and that's really really hard. And see, when again at a Google with 180,000 people, it's easy to carry people like that. But show me a company with 4 employees and 2 of them are like, well, they're good people, but that's half your company. So if it's someone you like having coffee with, but they're not doing their job, I'm being honest.
No,
I'm telling you.
Yeah, no, this is real
Versus
talk.
so again, it goes back to culture. So if you have a if you're saying that a high performing team is part of our culture, like there were guys I played football with that I didn't like, but on Saturday afternoons they were absolutely amazing at what they did, and we won a national championship when I was at South Carolina State. So the question is, what was our vision? Our vision was to win a national championship. So it's do I like you in the locker room? Well, you're not the nicest guy. I'm not going to invite you to my wedding, but we all have national championship rings.
We can come together around something bigger.
That's the thing. So
Hey, look at that. Connectivity, right? Vision, the right people, pulling those things together.
And that's where
It's like he's done this before.
and that's where, and again, it's hard because this is such an emotional thing. It's so emotional when it's your baby. It's human nature to want to be with people. It's our bias. We want to be with people that look, talk, sound, come from the same backgrounds that we do, like the same coffee we like. The guy from Hootie's upstairs likes Hootie and the Blowfish, right? We want those things because that gives us comfort when we're dealing with something stressful. Not that these are bad people. They just may not be qualified to do the job that we need to get done.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, so that's just what I would challenge you to think about from a talent standpoint. Think about that when you're thinking about your next hire, because your next hire, again, going to a smaller firm, we live and die by the people we hire.
Yeah, I feel like I need to go rethink some things. I'll be back. Damn it. Okay, so we got to wrap it up, but we do have a time for a couple of questions. If anybody's got anything burning, this dude has been in big things for a long time.
And we only scratched the surface. Like we had like
we got through 3 of 17 points.
Yeah,
just so y'all know.
Yeah, I'll hang around after lunch. Or
Hopefully
during
you were
lunch.
entertained at least.
Go ahead.
How do you like convey your vision to like people like you're hiring? I would say, like how do you convey like, all right, this is what we stand for, and then like how do you, I would say like in a sense like get people to buy into the vision as well.
Enforce the values.
How do you do it? I mean, you're running a business. Tell us how you do it.
Oh, I prefer interpretive dancing, but when that doesn't work, I yell. No. So, I mean, I think it is first and foremost, you have to be the person. They have to see it in you. You have to walk that thing, whether you want to be or not, you're the leader. So you have to walk those values, and they'll test you, man. Those values, those people will test you. So you have to be the one that does it. And then it's got to be a part of everything that you do, right? If one of your core values is to always take better care of people than you should expect to be taken care of, then that means you're going to have to deal with some stuff that is going to go against that. And sometimes it's money. So
it's exact. Yes.
So, but you got to walk it and live it every day. They got to see it before they buy in.
This is kind of a harsh statement because I think to your point that we don't have a Fortune 500 company here. I think that we know our people in South Carolina are I think they are value, but we also value cheap labor. And we've been valuing cheap labor for a really, really, really long time. And the concept of cheap labor, and I think that I'm afraid that it's surprising that we don't have a headquarters. And so at some point, sometimes you have a value you say, and then you have a value that you
Practice. So that's your real value. That's your real value.
you want this company, they're so great, they're coming, but really what you want is you're selling, you'll have cheap employee, you'll have cheap labor, you'll have cheap tax breaks, you'll have this, you'll this. We're saying we're cheap, we're not saying we're top notch. And I think we got to switch that a little bit.
Here's what I'll do. I won't tell you what I think, but I'll tell you what my experience is. So when I lived in Connecticut, I wanted to move back to South Carolina so bad, and I could not find a job in South Carolina because at that point in my career, I made too much money, and I couldn't find. It didn't even have to be a Fortune 500. And when I was willing to take a pay cut, companies in South Carolina didn't believe I wanted to take a pay cut. And then when I lived in Charlotte, I watched all these companies pick North Carolina and Georgia over South Carolina. So I won't tell you what I personally think. I'll tell you when we get off the stage and I'm off the mic. But I did witness that. And then so as this talent that the state wants to attract back, you know, I think there has to be jobs here for us to come. And I'll tell you this, I'll say this on a mic. I even called the mayor's office. I said, hey, I'm a double graduate from USC. You know, I'm at the director level, and I would love to move back to Columbia. Can someone help me get plugged in? And it just, there are a lot of us that would love to move back to the state.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The willing, that helps.
Yeah.
Time for one last question. Anybody in the back?
Yeah. So when you're hiring someone, your candidates are often going to tell you what you want to hear about them. And let's say my value is kindness. They're going to say, oh yeah, I'm one of the kindest people you know, the kind of people you meet. How do you, in a sense, beat around the bullshit and figure out if they're actually?
Yeah. Kindness. Yeah, I like. Yeah.
You know, let me put my age. No, you know, I think experiential interviewing is really good. You know, writing really good competency-based interview questions. And that's one thing we did really well at Google. We would ask you to give empirical examples. So, of course, I wouldn't say, Greg, give me an example of how you're kind. But I would have some examples of, hey, so there was here's a situation where a customer was upset about X, Y, and Z. You know, can you give me an example where you've dealt with X, Y, and Z? And, you know, you kind of push and push and push. And, you know, sooner or later, they start to kind of reveal who they are. Also, one thing we did at Google that people, you know, I've seen great candidates not get hired is the reference checks. I mean, like really, hey, Greg, what kind of person is Jerrell? Like, you know, Jerrell's great on a mic, but how is he to servers at restaurants? Like, you know, so the reference checks are, because people who are like legitimate references, they're just going to say, hey, Jerrell's a great programmer, but I wouldn't invite him to my house. So I'm a fan of reference checks and checking in on people like that.
I don't have much to add to this other than I'm now interested in the question. Is there a way to put people to work without hiring them, you know, through testing or through a trial period to see how they operate under fire? I mean, do you see that as a practice up in the corporate world?
Well, you know, for years, I mean, most companies, you know, did 90-day probation periods, 12-month probation periods, and it's something that companies moved away from. As there was a fight for talent. But yeah, I mean, and I think some companies are probably considering going back to that. But there's all kinds of, I mean, gosh, when I was here at the Moore School, when I interviewed at Target put me through deep psychological, like a battery of tests.
This sounds horrible.
Yeah, no, I went through like a 2 or 3 hour interview with a psychologist. They did, there are ways like
Rita's implementing this right now in real time. She's like 2 hour psych eval, all employees.
There are like assessments that you can do, and of course there, you know, it's again, but I think culturally. A lot of it is the interview process. The interview process is probably the worst indicator, though, of how performance will be, right?
Because of just the nature of it, it's sort of staged. And
it's staged, but there are some companies, you know, again, I'm a little bit older, that got it right. You know, GE used to be a brutal company to interview for. Pepsi was hardcore. I mean, they just, you know, and I'm not saying put people through 20 interviews, but the people who interviewed you, you know, they really interviewed you. They'd say, so tell me, and there are some different styles and practices that you can say. So I'll tell you another one. and I can find that book. The book is called Who. But when I interviewed with American Eagle, they actually didn't ask about job performance. They said, so talk to me about when you were in high school. And they wanted to know what kind of person you were. Did you run for class president, or did you not participate in anything? And they wanted to, because for them, they wanted to know if you were going to be a self-starter or not. Yeah. You know, see,
carjacking count as self-starting?
There are all kinds of ways to assess talent.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's the session. I hope you had a good experience. Jerrell, I want to thank you for your time. Thanks so much. Can we give him a round of applause, please? So we're going to break for lunch. Food trucks are outside. It is not 20 degrees anymore. Hooray, Columbia. But come back. Get something to eat. Come back. Starting around 1:15. We have got some incredible afternoon sessions. Cassia Leah Ray is going to be on the main stage. Rita and my favorite human on the planet, my wife, are going to be doing a conversation about Rita's journey, which is incredible. Y'all, please come back. Pull some people off the street. Let's keep this energy going. Thank you so much for sticking around with us. Cheers.